Hello everyone, welcome back to Valley of the Mist Block of the Month. I'm Adriane Ritter.
And I'm Shelley McNeely.
And we are here with the September 2025 Block of the Month. Continuing our house theme for the year, this month's block is an apartment house. And if you're making one to turn in at the Guild, it's due in October. I want to mention a couple of things to start. One, mainly with pressing. And with seam allowances. Okay, a lot of times this year we have had correcting pieces. This block does not have any. It's got 5,000 pieces. No, it doesn't have 5,000 pieces. It just seems like it. And you really just have to be on your game with your 1/4-inch seam. So we're recommending a scant 1/4-inch seam. We're going to tell you the sizes things need to be as you go. But you really can't have too big of seams or they're not going to work. If you have too little of seams, the outside's going to look funny. But anyway, I mean, this apartment house fills the whole block. All right, back to pressing. In this block, we do have some half square triangles. Those, you're going to press the seam open. Everything else, you're going to press to the darker fabric or to the less complicated, how it wants to go, except for where the junction is between this darker corner side of the apartment house meets the front of the apartment house, because that has a seam that goes all the way down. Everywhere else, the seams don't meet. But here you're going to want to alternate the pressing as these ones come together. So we're not going to remind you of that. Just know that if they're pressed the same, you're going to have to change one of them because they need to nest or they just won't lay nicely. Okay, so I think that's about it. Oh, just definitely download the instructions so you have the list, because like I said, there are a lot of pieces. And Shelley's going to go over those right now.
We'll try and get through this list. Okay, to start with, our focus fabric for this year, and this is if you turn in the blocks for the drawing. Otherwise, you can use your own focus fabric, is Poppy's Tie-Dye by Island Boutiques. And you can buy these at the Guild meeting. Fat quarters. Okay, now, cut list. Start with, we're going to be doing some half square triangles. And the pieces for the half square triangles might seem like we're giving you too much, because what you're going to end up with is actually enough of those pieces to do 2 blocks. So some of these will be extras if you're not doing 2 blocks.
Yeah, because the color combinations, there's 3 different half square triangles and they're different color combo on each one.
Right. Okay, so to start with, the door, which is the focus fabric, is 1.5 by 2.5. Then sky, we're going to need 2 7/8" squares. Those are for the half square triangles. Then 1.5 by 3.5" piece, 2 1.5 by 4" pieces, and then for the windows I should say, there's 7 1.5 by 2.5, and they're of various colors. And then there's 2 1.5 by 2", and those are also various colors, because this is an apartment house. Everybody might decorate different. Then for the chimney, we have 2 1.5" squares, and then for what we're calling the shadowed part of the house, 2 2 7/8" squares. These again are for the half square triangles. Then 2 1.5 by 4.5" pieces, and then 6 1.5" squares, 2 2.5 by 4.5" pieces, and then for the bright side of the house, we have 1 1.5 by 8.5" piece, then 2 2.5 by 8.5" pieces, and 2 1.5 by 4" pieces. Then there's 8 1.5" squares, and then 2 1.5 by 2.5" pieces. Now for the roof, we have 2 2 7/8" squares, again for the half square triangles, and 1 2.5 by 6.5" piece.
Whew!
Yes.
Okay. So she didn't tell you where everything goes because it is written down in the instructions.
Right.
And there are, little pieces between each of the windows or near the windows, things like that. A lot of this goes together very easily because, as you can see, we're going to do it by row. And 2 of the rows are exactly the same other than the color of the windows, which is up to you. Okay, so the first thing we want you to do is to make your half square triangles. Now, we do have a separate video on making half square triangles if you're not comfortable with that. But basically, you're going to take a colored, 2 of them have a piece of sky. And so I would draw a line on the piece of sky. And one of them is a combo of the light roof and the dark roof. And so pick the lighter fabric. Anyway, match them up as you need to per the color combination. So sky and light roof, dark roof and light roof, sky and dark roof. And you're going to draw a line, and there's 2 methods. You either draw a line, you can draw a diagonal line, and then, Shelley, you draw another line? She draws a line a quarter inch away from the diagonal.
Center, yeah.
And that's her seam line. I just draw the center line, and I sew a quarter inch from the center. And then after you do that, you cut them apart, you press the seam open, and then they trim to
2.5 inch squares.
Yeah, 2.5 inch squares. So they look like this. And these ones are, as you can see, are not trimmed because I still have the little dog ears on them. These should be pretty close to the right size, the 2.5 inch square. Okay. Now, once you do that, we can't emphasize enough laying out all the pieces as they go to show you, how they lay in the block, because it's going to be tricky if you don't.
Yeah. Otherwise, right? If you do this, you know where they go. You've made your colored windows or how you want to arrange them, and then it sews together really easy.
Yeah. Okay. So you made your half square triangles. You've pressed them. You've trimmed them. You've laid out your whole block. And now the first thing we want you to do is sew together after the half square triangles. The second thing we want you to do is to sew this first row. So, and we're going to leave Shelley's block up here with these rows the entire time in case you're not sure of the rows. But basically, we have this chimney row, then we have this roof row, top row of windows, then just kind of this spacer, this living space row.
Yeah, that's a good.
And then another row of windows, another living space row. That's easy. And then these 2 at the very end, we kind of do these together because they have to go. We have to do row, half row, put them and then sew them together, and then put them on either side of the door. So that's the whole block in a nutshell. So we will be back with our top row sewn together, our half square triangles trimmed, and then we will proceed from there.
Right.
All right, that was a tough row to sew. You know what? The only thing that was tough was remembering that the smaller piece went on the right side, right? So you had 2 of the same, and then a small piece. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how big should that row be, Shelley?
It should be 1.5, obviously, because you started out 1.5 by 12.5. Every row should end up being 12.5 inches long. So right. we'll remind you as we go.
Yeah, try to keep checking that 12.5.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't proceed if it's too little. If it's too big.
Even that, I would try to get it
right.
Well,
this next row we do with the roof, it's really important. The other ones, I guess you could trim from the edges, but you are going to want them to match.
Yeah.
You don't want to look like a wonky builder. You are going to want to match that that side seam. Okay. So the next part we're going to make 2 rows now. They're pretty easy rows. But before we do that, I did forget to talk about, for those of you that are new sewers, how to effectively trim a half square triangle, which is in our other block called our other video called Half Squared. But basically, you want to use a ruler that has a diagonal 45-degree line on it. And then you take your half square triangle, and you put the diagonal line under that, and then the first trim you do, now these are obviously already trimmed, but you want to take the minimum you have to off to get rid of the wavy edge and the little flags. Okay, so now what's remaining is on the diagonal, and you've taken off that little bit amount, and it should be bigger than 2.5. Okay, if it's not bigger than 2.5, then you need to back up a step.
Yeah, you
because
start over.
Your seam was too big.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you turn the block around, put it back on that diagonal, and now put that line you just trimmed on the 2.5-inch mark on both sides, and trim off the extra. Okay, so always work from the diagonal, and the first trim should be minimal, and then the second trim finishes it off. Okay, so now if I can put this piece back up here correctly, we have shown you the orientation, so you have all 3 of the half square triangles you need for the whole block. And so you've got sky and shadow, shadow and main roof, then the main roof piece, and then the last half square triangle, which is the main roof and sky. And you're going to sew those together. At this point, remember, the only seam you're worried about the pressing is this one where the roof parts join with the main part of the roof. And you're going to alternate that going down, right? And then the next row 3, is easy. It's just that top piece. How big is this one, Shelley? It's
4.5
by 1.5.
1.5. Yeah.
Yep. And this one is 1.5 by
8.5.
Okay, so that tells you how big when you sew these two together. This one should be 8.5. These two together should be 4.5. And we're gonna press all that.
Sew those 2 rows together.
So these two together.
Then you end up with a piece that's 4.5 by 12.5, and that needs to be pretty much exact.
Okay.
So.
And then we're going to sew that to this top piece.
Right.
Keeping.
I'm sorry. 2 and 3. I'm sorry. I messed that up. That was 3.5 by 12.5.
These two together are 3.5 by 12.5.
Yeah.
But when they're all sewn together,
it's 4.5 by 12.5.
Okay. So our rows here, there's a lot of rows. There's 9 rows, but the rows they all start out at either 1.5 or 2.5. And so we keep putting these together, and we're going to keep telling you the sizing as you go.
Right.
Okay, so when we come back, we will have the top 3 rows all sewn together.
Right.
All right, we're looking good. Got that roof on the house, and we're ready to start our main part of the house. Okay, so in this chunk of the process, we're going to tackle rows 4 through 7, and it's way easier than it sounds. Okay, so there's really only 3, there's a lot of different fabrics, but 3 different size pieces. We have 1.5-inch squares that are these pieces of the shadowed house on either ends and in the middle of the window rows. And then we have the windows, which are 1.5 by 2.5, but also these center pieces between the windows of the main house are that same size. So there's 8 pieces that we're dealing with right now that are all the same 1.5 by 2.5. Then we have the 2 parts of the house. And what size are those, Shelley? We have the shadowed parts are
2.5
by
4.5 and 2.5 by 8.5.
Okay. And so that 4.5 tells you how wide this little window section needs to be when you're done. And the 8.5 tells you how wide the main part needs to be. Subsections, as you're doing it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, after you've laid out your colors of windows, you're going to sew together this row 4. And, you're just going alternating pieces as you go, adding pieces as you go along. And then you're going to sew together row 5, right? That's row 5, yeah, which is just 2 pieces. Make sure when you press them, you watch that pressing it here so it's not the same as right there. And then you're going to repeat that same process for the next 2 rows. Those 2 rows are exactly the same. Do them that way. So the rows these 2 rows together when you're done. So these rows together when you're done.
And you end up with a piece that's 6.5 by 12.5.
With 2 of the rows together.
With 4, with
I hadn't gotten that far.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were saying
no. Yeah. So you sew those 2 together, sew those 2 together. Then you're going to sew all 4 of. Then you're sew those 2 top and bottom together, and then you end up with a piece
6.5 by 12.5.
And then we're going to add that piece to the piece we already have. And now what size are we?
10.5 by 12.5.
All right. So we're going to come back and we're going to have all but the last 2 rows done. All right. We are almost done.
Right.
Okay, so now you're just going to sew together the rest of your pieces. No, just kidding. Okay. All right, so now we just have the bottom windows and the door parts of the house and the very bottom of the house. So the way we do this is you're gonna tackle this like in kind of 4 steps-ish. You're gonna sew together this row of windows, which is the shadowed part of the house, which is the remaining big window, and 2 of these 1.5-inch squares, and then a smaller window and 2 of the regular house 1.5-inch squares. That's one part of the row. Sew that all together. And then sew these 2 pieces, the big piece of the shadowed left, which is, I don't know what size it is, and the piece of the other part of the house. Sew those 2 together. Remember to alternate the pressing on those 2 where they connect. Then after you have those sewn, you're going to sew this row to this row. So you have one big left side of the apartment house. Then, and when that's done, how big should that be?
That should be 2.5 by 8.
Okay. So then we're going to sew this remaining window and 2 1.5-inch squares to either side of that and the bottom piece to it. And when that's done, oh wait, yeah. Okay, what size is that?
That's 2.5 by 4.
Okay. Then you're going to sew those to either side of the door. And when that's done, you have a piece that is
2.5 by 12.5.
Okay, the magic 12.5. Then we're going to, press the heck out of that and sew it to the top, and you should have your block. That's 12.5 by 12.5. Okay, so we're going to come back with our finished block. All right, the apartment's done. Done. Good job, everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have any words of wisdom. It went together pretty good.
It did. I did have to do a little trimming along the way because I tend to have my seams, especially if I'm sewing a whole bunch of them together, things get a little too big. I don't have trouble with them being too small, more too big.
I know, and also, you think you know your 1/4-inch seam, and I swear a machine has a mind of its own, because it does change a little bit.
I can do one seam, it'll come out exactly right, but it's when I do more that, it must be off a hair every time or something.
Yeah, so that's partly why we gave you the sizes. Also, someone asked us to start giving more sizes, so we're trying to be responsive to that. Anyway, so we will see you back here next month for October block.
Yes.
And good luck.